Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And this mic is definitely off. There we go. Okay, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Joshi-Mehendale and I'm a real estate broker based in Toronto and working in the GTA. On today's video, we're going to be talking about today's Bank of Canada rate announcement. Today is September 6th. And the Bank of Canada has had its umpteenth meeting for this year. They're only scheduled to meet, I think, about 8 times, and this was one of the meetings. Now, a lot of people predicted that this was going to happen, that the Bank of Canada was not going to raise its interest rate, and if you were one of those people, you would be right, because they decided to hold their key interest rate at 5%, which is actually great for a number of reasons. I've been saying this for a while and I've mentioned it on some of my previous videos. When the Bank of Canada raises its interest rate, it's doing this in an effort to bring inflation into check. Now, what we have to keep in mind is that the day that they raise their interest rate, it's not like the very next day it's going to impact, all mortgages, all lending, commercial lending, consumer purchases, and all of that, right? It takes time for that interest rate to trickle through the economy. Probably the fastest change and the most immediate change that we're seeing is in mortgage interest rates, because when the Bank of Canada raises their rate, so does your bank, and then you get a letter right away in the mail saying, hey, your interest rate is now XYZ. But aside from that, in order to bring the greater problem of inflation into check, it does take time for these bank interest rates increases to actually take effect, right, on the economy as a whole. And so a lot of economists have been saying for several months now that the Bank of Canada is probably overshooting and has probably overshot and has done more than what would have been required to bring it into check. Now, we don't know if it's a 3-month delay, a 4-month delay, a 6-month delay, what it is exactly. And then coupled with other issues, like in just general, the cost of living is going up. It's an election year, so the bunch of things that are sort of, up in the air in terms of that. And a lot of things like the stress test, for example, that was brought in 4 years ago, right? Things in the real estate market would look different if we didn't have a stress test. Even if the interest rate was higher, but we didn't have a stress test, it would look different. But we have the interest rate increasing, we have cost of living increasing, and we have a stress test. So all of these factors together, it's really hard to isolate sort of what has the biggest impact on real estate and the economy as a whole. But of course, these are all factors that feed into it. Now, all that being said, I'm just going back to the fact that economists were predicting that Bank of Canada has overshot, meaning that they've raised it too much and it's not actually going to have the desired effect of lowering inflation. So inflation numbers have been kind of all over the place. They were lower and then we went up again and then lower again. And it's not really where the target should be. And we're still in that basically cost of living crisis, I would be comfortable calling it, unfortunately, here in the GTA for sure, and in Canada as a whole. And we know that that's going to be a big ticket item for the federal political race that's going to happen sometime next year. And it's going to be a pretty big issue for all federal parties and all politicians that want to run this government. Based on kind of where the policies have been at, where the economic policy has been, where other, housing policies and stuff like that have been, where taxation rules have been, and all of these things kind of come together to impact the economy as a whole. And those things, that combination of things is what has brought us where we are today. That paired with immigration policy, with record numbers of people coming into the country, often with very good jobs, often with great credit, often with savings and assets from another country, bringing them here and having the power to buy. So anyway, I don't want to get too much into that. I talk about that a lot in terms of the buyer demand and the current supply issues that we have in the GTA. I do talk about that on a lot of my other videos, but I'm going to try to stick to the topic at hand, which is the Bank of Canada rate announcement. So what do you really need to know? Well, the target rate currently sits at 5%, and they raised it to 5% at their last meeting, which was in July. And they raised it 0.25% at that time. And then in June, as well. They raised it 0.25%. So over the summer, they've raised it about exactly 0.5%. The two meetings before that, interestingly, the ones that happened in March and April of 2023, they held the key interest rate where it was. So they had raised it every single meeting last year in 2022. Sorry, I think I don't have the January 2022 stat in front of me, but I think that they didn't raise it. They started raising it in March, and then March, April, June, July, September, October, December. Every single month was a raise. Every single meeting was a raise in 2022. Fast forward to 2023, in January, they raised it as well, 0.25%. In March and April, as I mentioned, they held it. So the target overnight interest rate was 4.5%, and they held it there. In June, they raised it 0.25% to 4.75. In July, they raised it another 0.25% to 5%. And at the most recent September meeting, they have decided to hold it at 5%. Now, of course, we can't predict what's going to happen later in this year, the rest of 2023. There's still the October meeting and the December meeting. So there's still 2 more meetings. And depending on how things go in the economy, they will, I guess, decide what they want to do, whether they want to keep it where it is at 5% or if they want to raise it again. It seems unlikely that they're going to bring it down. Just all factors are not sort of, alluding to that. I don't think that they're going to decrease the rate, because what they wanted to do out of this interest rate increase was to bring the economy into check, bring inflation in check, and that hasn't happened. Of course, as I mentioned previously, with the interest rate increase, there is a delayed effect, right? It's not like you just snap your fingers and then all of a sudden inflation's going to be in check. No, it takes time for that effect to trickle down through the economy, and for it to actually take effect. So I don't know what the math behind this is. I'm not an economist. I'm not a politician. I'm not any of those things, and glad for it. But I see, boots on the ground in terms of the real estate market every day. The biggest impact is with the interest rates going up. The biggest impact is on homeowners, especially those that have gotten mortgages on their homes in very low interest rate in a very low interest rate environments, which we saw for several years, pretty much all of the years that I've been in real estate, and that's about 9.5 going on 10 now. My entire career, we've been in a low interest rate environment until COVID hit. And even through COVID, we were in a very low interest rate environment until about, I would say, early January 2022. And that's when we saw the Bank of Canada starting to raise interest rates. And now they've just gone crazy, right? With raising the interest rate. So now, even though the overnight interest rate sits at 5%, a lot of banks are not offering 5%, right? They offer prime plus whatever. Now the stress test as well, that is measured at whatever the lending rate is plus 2%, right? The point of the stress test is to test you against a stress buffer. And so in principle, that makes a lot of sense. But if you look at it practically, people going through mortgage stress tests right now in the real estate sphere, any buyers that are looking to buy, the stress test is killing people, right? With crazy high incomes, great credit, great savings, and I'm talking down payments of at least 20% or more, right? People with less than that, I mean, it's hard to get a mortgage as it is, but even with people that have 20% or more down payment, just where the income aligns with the stress test, it's hard, right? Where 2 or 3 years ago, even a year and a half ago, I would say, you could get approved for a mortgage of $1 million. Today, that is much, much lower. It's hundreds of thousands lower. I don't have the exact math with me, but it's a big impact on buyers that are trying to buy. It's also a big impact on homeowners that bought homes and have mortgages from low interest rate environments that are now coming up for renewals, fast forward 3, 4, 5 years. Now at the renewal time, I've heard stories about people whose mortgage payments are doubling, right? If you were on variable, then it was going steadily up basically since last year, since early 2022. And every month, almost every 2 months, you were getting a notice from your bank, hey, your rate has risen. Hey, your rate has risen. So that wasn't really fun. And then those that were in fixed term contracts, now that they're coming up for renewals, their mortgage rates are essentially doubling, like their mortgage payments monthly are doubling. And it's crazy to see that all of a sudden, right? Because it's a big change. You can't really budget for it. And there will be some families that may not be able to afford that anymore. We've got these super extended amortizations, obviously, because majority of your mortgage payment, even though you're making it, is going towards paying interest, and even less is going towards paying principal, right? And so the principal balance just carries indefinitely forward, and we have these long extended amortizations, meaning even though you're paying off, even though you're paying your mortgage payment regularly, and you might be doing it for like 4, 5, 6 years, you're not really getting much closer to paying off any interest, principal, right? Because all of your payments are going into interest rates. So it is a tough lending environment right now. Not for the lender, of course. For homeowners that have renewals coming up, it's difficult. For homeowners with variable rate mortgages that are consistently going up, it's difficult. For buyers that are trying to get into the market and are trying to purchase a home and have everything else aligned, but have to go through this stress test in a higher interest rate environment, it's difficult, right? And their basically incomes are whatever they may be, their savings are whatever they may be, and the stress test just keeps getting tighter and tighter and tighter with these interest rate increases. And so their budget effectively, you know, all things held the same, their budget just keeps going down lower and lower, even though everything else is the same in terms of income and credit and savings for down payment and all of that. So it is a difficult sort of situation that we're in. Of course, the world doesn't revolve around real estate. I'm aware of that. I've had, you know, Instagram and YouTube comments suggest otherwise, but I am very much aware that the world doesn't revolve around real estate. However, in terms of Canadians having debt, like mortgage debt, and Canadians, you know, wanting to have homes and wanting to own homes and having to go through the stress test and all of this, it has a pretty big impact on a lot of people's lives, and that's why it's important to discuss. So that I am going to leave it right there for the time being in terms of the Bank of Canada rate announcement. If you do have any specific questions about how this might impact you or what it might mean for you going forward, if you have a renewal or something coming up and you're thinking about options of what to do for your home, whether to sell it, to refinance it, to, you know, renew your mortgage or extend it or what have you, if there's anything that you want to talk about, if it's real estate related, I'm more than happy to help you. If it's mortgage related, I'm more than happy to connect you with my mortgage team, and we can just talk some things through. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. All my contact information is in the box below, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you thought it was helpful, please give it a thumbs up and do subscribe, because I post informative real estate videos every single week. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you on the next one.